big. All right, so I'm going to stand today so I can move my hands around a little bit, and my body, I think it makes it a little bit easier to uh, stay energetic and focused. It's hard to sit and do one of these. So I'm going to talk about detox today. It's a really cool topic, and it is one of the most important topics for health, period. The objectives of what I want to go over today is mainly I want to give you an idea for like where toxins come from. What do we mean? What do we mean by toxins, anyways? And where do they come from? And what happens to them in our body? Like where do they go? Do they hang out? Do they leave? And how do they leave? And that's the big piece that I want to impart this knowledge on you of where things come from, but especially how our body gets rid of them. Because when that's not working effectively, as I'll talk about, the body just doesn't work very effectively. So I'm hoping to give you an idea for how this works, so that, and then I want to give you some of the tools that I use all the time in my practice to help people optimize their detox pathways. So when I talk about detox, what I mean is kind of the colloquial term, which is essentially a toxin is like by definition it's a poison, or it's anything that is harmful or unpleasant or in a pervasive or insidious way. That is the definition I'm reading here. Also just a poisonous substance. So it's basically something that, it's just something that's harmful for us. And most people, when they say detox, they mean, getting rid of those harmful things from our body, for example. But I just want to point out that medically, as was brought up in the group on one of the threads, medically detox means that you're detoxing from a substance like alcohol or opiates are common ones that people need to do detox for, because on those substances you can get dependent, meaning if you don't have it, your body physiology doesn't work right, basically, without it there, because it's so used to it. So people need to do a detox to be safe when they to get off of those things if they're dependent. So that's what's meant medically. That's not what we're talking about. I'm going to use the word detox today because that's what most people call this topic. However, the actual term for this is depuration. Depuration is a word that means to free impurities from something. So that's actually the word that is more appropriate, but we'll use the word detox. Major toxin categories. I'm really glad it was brought up in the thread when I asked people what toxins mean to them in the group, that mental and emotional toxins are very real. Take, for example, we use the term a toxic relationship. If you've ever been in a toxic relationship, you know that it is, what a mental and emotional toxin feels like, because it basically predisposes you to disease, right? Can cause disease, but it can cause dis-ease in the mental and emotional realms. Easily leads to anxiety and depression, as an example. So this is a huge topic. Detox is so vast. There's mental, emotional, I consider spiritual toxins real, and there's physical. I want to focus on the physical today because I think that that's going to be the most applicable to all of you who are watching this or watch it at a later date. And if you have questions, ask me about anything. And if you really want me to talk about mental and emotional toxins and like what that means and how we transmute that stuff I can do that at a later time. But today I want to focus on the physical, all right? Huge topic. Gonna just try to give you the most important pieces. So why do we care, first of all, about this? Well, speaking to chronic illness, because most of you who see this are in that boat, or you have chronic illness yourself, or you are a friend or family member of someone who has chronic illness, um, the experience that I have is that so many people feel like after going through numbers of practitioners and specialists, they eventually reach a point, unless they've gotten help from that, they eventually reach a point where they just feel like they've tried everything. And one of the things that I see is that people they've tried everything within a certain bucket, right? And a lot of times it's easy to lose sight of the fact that if we don't address some of the foundational components of what our body needs to function in a healthy way, that we can't heal. And even if we don't address, say, a root cause of something, we can do some of these foundational pieces and symptoms can drastically improve. So one of the things I'm always assessing and working on with everybody, regardless of the level of illness they have, how long they've been sick, is I'm making sure that their detox pathways are working well, because I can work with somebody who's been sick for a decade, let's say, and if their detox pathways aren't working well, I can do nothing else, not optimize their diet or anything else, not give them any supplements, except for things aimed at helping their body to detox, and they will, I can say with almost 100% certainty, start to feel better. Their symptoms will be a little less intense. They might be a little less frequent, because toxins, the way that they're harmful to the body is that they kind of gum up the works. Basically, they mess with various aspects in the cells. One of the major areas is the mitochondria. This is many things are mitochondrial toxins. The mitochondria is like the energy production area of the cell. So one of the ways that manifests, a lot of times when people have fatigue, it's related to something like not detoxing well. It's because the mitochondria just aren't working that well. You're not getting enough energy production. But toxins, depending on the toxin, can affect any body system, really. The nervous system is big, as I'll talk about in a minute. So why should we care? Because it is foundational to any of us healing, or if we're healthy and well, staying well, or it's applicable to optimizing our health to get rid of toxins that come in. So the things that I consistently see that improve with the approaches I'm going to talk to you about today are brain fog, bloating, constipation. Relatively any digestive thing will start to improve. PMS, premenstrual syndrome, that generally greatly improves with this. Menopausal symptoms, headaches, fatigue, mood will often stabilize a bit. Muscle and joint pain definitely improves when you start to detox. And skin issues, definitely, especially things like atopic dermatitis or eczema. Once you start detoxing appropriately, those things will start to improve. So just from what I listed, from my experience of what I see improve, you can tell that basically the whole body is affected in a positive way from this. Okay, so I want to teach you a model that is really helpful in understanding detox. And a good model is simple, and it effectively describes kind of every piece that you need to understand. So this is a really simple model. It's called the Reservoir Model, okay? So basically, all the Reservoir Model is that you have an inflow, okay? So water flowing in, this is the reservoir, okay? So you have a pool, and then you have an outflow. Super simple model, right? But this, understanding basically the three parts of inflow, the pool, and the outflow, we can understand, if we understand these three components, we can help ourselves along in this process. So what's the inflow? Well, before I go to that, I just want to say one of the things about this model to help with this topic of detox is to basically with the reservoir, just think about if you increase the inflow, but the outflow stays the same, you've got the pool filling up, right? If you don't change the outflow and you decrease the inflow, the pool goes down. And then likewise, if you don't change this, the inflow, but you increase the outflow, the pool goes down, right? And then if that stays the same and you decrease the outflow, then the pool fills up. And then there's like the balance of the two. You could increase this and you could increase that, So that's a way to start to just use this model to think about what we're talking about with detox. So what's the inflow? There are two types of categories of toxins that get into our body. One is exogenous. Exogenous means from outside the body. So this is medications that we might take. This is pesticides and herbicides in food. This is heavy metals, which come from the soil and from things like fertilizers. This is like chemical treatments of our water. This is toxins from industry or like occupation. Some people are in toxic work environments, like hair salons, very toxic. All of the volatile chemicals used in sprays and different things in that. Golf courses, super toxic. All of the because of all of the herbicides, pesticides sprayed on the grass to keep it the way it is. So there's lots of different places that these exogenous outside chemicals can come in. There's also endogenous chemicals. So this is really important to understand and think about, because I think for many of us, when we hear toxins and need to detoxify, we kind of think about that external stuff coming in, but understand that everything in our body eventually gets like recycled or broken down, and when these things break down, they're then toxins to our body, meaning that they have to get out. So really good examples of this, like hormones, especially in females. I see estrogen. Estrogen has to get broken down and get out of the body, and if you're not detoxing appropriately, you start to get these estrogen metabolites that are still in your body going around, and that can create issues, and it can predispose to some estrogen metabolites predisposed to cancer. So, hormones are a good example of breakdown products of our body. Any metabolic product has a breakdown. It has to get out of our body. So the things I'm going to talk about today will aid that as well. Okay, so, and somebody just jumped on. I don't know if you were here when I mentioned the reservoir model. This is kind of the model that I'm using. If you weren't here, I'm just going to mention it again quick. So this is the inflow, there's a reservoir or pool, and then there's an outflow. And essentially we're going to use this model to understand the different places where we can affect the total body burden of toxins. This is like your body, like the reservoir is your body, essentially. So it's nice to keep this pool fairly low. So I had mentioned like a minute ago that you can affect the inflow or the outflow. You could decrease the inflow, but you could also increase the outflow. And you could do both. And depending on what you do, that total body burden, that total reservoir of toxins in your body will increase or decrease. So how do we slow the inflow? How do we decrease exogenous toxins? We're not going to probably, it's not really worth focusing on how do I decrease the toxins that my body naturally makes. That's just sort of natural. It's endogenous. There's little that you're going to do with that. So if you want to decrease the inflow, you really need to focus on what you're bringing into your body. Depending on where you live in the world, I know there's some people who are in the group and going to be seeing this, that live in countries that have much better agricultural practices and laws than we do in the U.S. The food system in the U.S. is quite abysmal when it comes to the safety and the health of our population. But just consider, terms like organic, obviously, pasture raised when it comes to animals. If you're eating seafood, finding a resource to help you learn what fish are and seafoods are sustainable but also low in heavy metals. So mercury is common in fish. I use the Monterey Bay Sea Aquarium Seafood Watch. It's a website. It's pretty awesome. They have all kinds of guides to help you understand where your lowest burden of metal toxins are coming from in fish. The Environmental Working Group, that is an awesome site for all things toxin related when it comes to food. They have a list of 50 foods that they test every year. The top 12 are the dirty dozen, and the bottom 15 are the clean 15, and then there's the ones in the middle. So at the least, I tell my patients, try to eat the dirty dozen organic, because those we know, because they're tested amongst a ton of foods to be the heaviest chemical burden from pesticides and herbicides. So at least the dirty dozen, and if the more things you can eat organic, the better. But that list is helpful. There's a couple of other ones that are sneaky, so that aren't on that list, because that list is about whole foods. So wheat in the United States, wheat is a really important one to eat organic, because wheat is not only sprayed with Roundup, which has glyphosate, which is very toxic to our bodies and our mitochondria. Wheat is not only sprayed while it's growing, but after wheat is harvested, they'll spray it because it will prevent fungal growth on the grain. So literally, you're spraying chemicals on the wheat, and then once it's dried out, it's ground up or whatever, and goes to the store. Like there's a lot of chemicals in wheat from the United States. Another one's garbanzo beans. That's another one that's really heavily sprayed with glyphosate. And raisins, actually, they mention on the Environmental Working Group that raisins, if they don't consider it like whole produce because it's a dried product, it's processed a little bit. But they said if that was like part of the list, that would probably be number one, because grapes are so heavily sprayed. And so I make sure to always feed my kid organic raisins. So if you're in a toxic job or industry, obviously removing yourself from that is important, but it's not feasible for everyone to just like change their career path and quit their job. So if you're in a job, so like say you're a hairstylist and there's a lot of chemicals in that, start to look into less toxic products that you can use. If you are exposed, so I mentioned golf courses and how toxic those are. If you are a golfer and you go golfing, those shoes should never come in your house. Like they should stay outside your house, because you'll track that stuff from the golf course anywhere you go in your house. So just starting to kind of reflect on where am I probably getting my largest exposures of chemical toxins from the outside world, and decreasing that where you can. Okay, the pool. So I mentioned the pool is the body. Where do these toxins go in the body? It depends on the toxin, but one of the largest places that it will go is in adipose cells, or which are fat cells. A lot of chemicals dissolve in fat, and so that's where they will go and they will bind up. So the brain, made of largely of fat, and the rest of the nervous system, the nerves are all sheathed in fat. Hi, whoever just came on. And but depending on, and in those places it will start to affect the mitochondria, which I mentioned, which is like the energy function of every cell. But depending on the toxin, it could be stored in bone, so like metals like lead stored in bone. So there's lots of different places, but largely fat. And I want to mention that one because as I'm talking about getting this stuff out, that's kind of the main pool that I'll be talking about decreasing. And for people on live, just if you have a question or something, just comment it in there. I gotta just grab a drink of water really quick too. And Happy New Year. I was saying at the beginning, it's really, really shocking to me that today is the last day of the year. Okay. All right. So, how do toxins get out of our body? They mainly get out through the biggest ways that most of us probably think about is through our digestive tract, through the stool, and through our urine. A lot of times people actually don't, they think more about the urine, like, yeah, I probably pee most of the stuff out. But the liver and the digestive tract are probably the biggest players. Close second is the kidneys and the urinary system. But often overlooked is the fact that through our skin, that's a major detox organ. So we can get a lot of toxins out through our skin. And the lungs, actually, anything that can get volatilized and like turn into a gas, we'll breathe out. So acetone is one breakdown product of different things in our body. And acetone, fingernail polish remover, acetone, we'll breathe that out, actually. So that's kind of interesting. But I want to talk about the anatomy. I want to make sure you understand really like the majority of how detox happens. So whether it comes from the inside or the outside, say there's going to be a toxin, and for our purposes, we can think of it being in the bloodstream. Okay, so it's floating around in the body. And the liver is this huge organ down here. I mean, the liver goes from like center and over here, and it's as thick as you are, and it's just this massive powerhouse of an organ. And it's estimated that at any time there's like 10 to 30% of all the blood in our body is moving through the liver. That's amazing if you really think about it. So it's this huge organ, and there's blood just pumping through it all the time. And the liver does it does all of these functions to keep us alive. Like, it stores sugar in the form of glucose so that if we don't have enough, it can release it really quick. If we don't have enough glucose stored and we need more, the liver will make it. The liver makes clotting factors. The liver makes it processes all our fats and makes fats and sends them out, and cholesterol. So it does all these just really essential things, but it also has enzymes in it to break down and change most toxins so that they can get out of our body. So for our purposes, we're basically going to consider like the liver is the first stop. Okay, the stuff's floating around in our blood, and it gets into the liver, and the liver does a two-phase process to most things to get them out of our body. So phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 of liver detox does something to the molecule to change it in some way. So you had A, it went through phase 1 in the liver, and now you have B. And then phase 2 will take B and turn it into C. After you get to C, there is like basically one of two different things that's going to happen. So the anatomy of the liver is that so the liver produces bile, and the bile leaves the liver and goes into the gallbladder, okay? And the gallbladder is connected to the small intestine, to the digestive tract. So one of the primary ways that the body gets stuff out is after it goes through this phase 1, phase 2 process in the liver. The toxin, the letter C toxin, I'm calling it, is going with the bile into the gallbladder. And then when the gallbladder squeezes and does its thing, it goes into the digestive tract. So this is the really, really important part that I try to make sure that all my patients understand, and everybody understands when I teach this, is that now you have the bile and all the toxic stuff from the liver in the digestive tract, but it has to get out. And the way it gets out is through having a bowel movement with the stool, right? But bile is this interesting thing. The body likes to recycle it. So so that it doesn't have to make more. So we reabsorb a lot of bile, and we also reabsorb a lot of toxins with the bile. So the primary thing that binds up the bile so that it leaves us and doesn't get reabsorbed is fiber in our diet. This is one of the reasons that fiber is really important for our body. That this and like the health of our microbiome are the two major reasons that I consider fiber being so important. So you can imagine that, like, with this model, if you're not having regular bowel movements, so like constipation has to be addressed, because all that's happening is like now this outflow, there's like this little, because it's getting reabsorbed, it's not leaving, so it's like coming back into here. All the while, the inflow is not changing. So you've got this pool, and and instead of all this stuff leaving, a lot of it's coming back in. So all that's happening is this pool's filling up, and it's filling up, and it's filling up. And what that looks like with chronic disease is all of this stuff in here is like gumming up the works. It's basically inhibiting the body's processes that it needs to do, to either inhibiting or using a lot of work for the body to try to get these toxins out, instead of those same things being used as part of the body's natural healing mechanisms to get well. So usually if this pool is building up and building up, usually chronic symptoms will start to get worse over time. And so if we can do something to decrease this, symptoms will usually start to improve, regardless of how long they've been there or whatever the diagnosis is. So we have to get the bowels moving. That's why I want you to understand the anatomy, how important fiber is. So I like people to have at least 2 bowel movements a day, and getting plenty of water, because that allows you to have more fiber. Sometimes a lot of people supplement with fiber. I want them to get their fiber through their diet, but if you're not eating a lot of plants right now, it's totally worth supplementing with fiber. The amount of fiber that I recommend in a day is 30 to 50 grams of fiber, and that's more than a lot of people are getting. But this is like without taking anything, right? Like, this is one major way that we help our body to get stuff out. So we're kind of talking about, in this model, like, this is the digestive system, right? The liver's kind of sitting here, right? It's taking this pool of stuff, and the liver's like doing its phase 1 and 2 thing, and then putting stuff out here. The other thing that can happen after phase 2 with that C toxin that we had A, and then we had B and C, is sometimes it doesn't go through the bile into the digestive tract, depending on what it is. Sometimes it goes back into the blood, but the liver like packaged it in such a way that like it's going to go into the blood, and then the kidneys are going to filter it out, and it's going to come out in our urine. But as long as we're drinking enough water and our kidneys are healthy, I don't usually think about needing to do a great deal to help stuff get out in the urine. I just need to make sure we're drinking enough water. Electrolytes are important for the kidney health, but really the supporting the liver and what it does in the digestive tract is like rule number 1. So if we're looking at the liver being in this spot right here, and we know there's phase 1 and 2, then we can ask ourselves, well, what does phase 1 and phase 2 need to do their work, right? Phase 1 largely encompasses B vitamins. There's way too many things for each one of these phases for me anyways to remember all of them. In my notes here, B vitamins is what I put. B2, B3, B6, 12, folic acid, because these are the major ones. I believe magnesium's in there. Phase 1 doesn't usually seem to be such an issue, but an easy way to support phase 1 is like a B complex vitamin. Hopefully you can get enough B vitamins in your diet, but magnesium and B complex, easy enough uh, to support phase one. I'm thirsty today. So phase two is really like the most important thing, I think, because if you have this two-step process and the second step doesn't happen, you've got this intermediate, right? This thing in the middle. So you had A, went through phase one, and now you have B. And if you don't have the second part, you don't get to C. And a lot of times, B is more toxic than the original thing was. Kind of crazy, right? One example of this is Acetaminophen, or Tylenol is the brand name. So the liver breaks down Tylenol, and that intermediate product is really toxic, and that's why if you've heard about how toxic Tylenol can be to the liver, and people can go into acute liver failure from Tylenol overdose, it's because of the intermediate product, and it's not phase two isn't working fast enough to break it down into something less toxic, and so it can get out. But this is true with a lot of different things. So I always like to think of phase two as like the limiting step, or like it's that last step that I really need to make sure is working in the liver. One of my all-time favorite nutrient supplements is N-acetylcysteine. It's also called NAC. It's such a cool nutrient. It's an amino acid. Cysteine is an amino acid. It's a sulfur-containing amino acid. It's got a sulfur group on it. And NAC, just to like give you an idea of what it does in the body, one of the things it does is it's a building block for glutathione. Glutathione is like the most potent antioxidant in our body. There's other really oxidant things, but glutathione is basically the major antioxidant that we think of. So NAC is a building block for glutathione, which you might have heard of. And NAC is also used in that phase two pathway. So N-acetylcysteine is one of the common things that I'll use to support people's phase two liver detox functions. And another component, because I mentioned the sulfur, is that sulfation, or using sulfur and attaching it to things, is another part of how phase two works. So foods that contain certain sulfur compounds are really beneficial to liver function. So the brassica family and the allium family are really liver supportive foods. The brassica family is like broccoli, cabbage, and all kinds of stuff in there. There's cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. Those all have sulfur compounds that support phase two liver detox. That's really cool. It's an awesome way to use food as medicine. So I'll have people, especially if there's like an estrogen dominant picture, or I think that their liver functions like a little sluggish, and they're having symptoms of like PMS or menopausal symptoms, things that I think are due to or related to too much estrogen. I'll want to support their phase two, and one of the ways is I'll start having females with problems like that eat more brassica family stuff and an allium family. So allium is the onions and the garlic, and those are the most common ones, but there's shallots and leeks and everything. So those have sulfur compounds that help phase two liver detox as well. So I mean, everybody should be eating those. I think I eat onions and maybe garlic every single day, and brassica at least every other day, almost every day. It's just kind of some of the things that we always have in our fridge. So those foods will support phase two detox. There's some antioxidant herbs that I think of as antioxidant that help support liver function. Curcumin, which comes from turmeric. That's really turmeric. It's like once you start reading about it, it's like, what doesn't it do? But it's really liver supportive. It's really antioxidant. So I originally learned about curcumin and thought of it as anti-inflammatory, but it's which it is. But now I also like really put it into the category of hepatoprotective, which means liver protective, via its antioxidant capacity. And milk thistle is another one that's really protective and regenerative to the liver. And those are things you want to think about when you're supporting the liver to detox is keeping the cells healthy, which means keeping healthy amount of antioxidants around. So those are a couple of herbs that I often use that way. And taurine, it's another one that more recently, taurine's another amino acid, and it's used in that phase too. That's another one recently that I've just really been liking what I'm learning and reading about it. So I've been using that a little bit more for liver detox support, as well as for some other things. Looks like there was somebody left, maybe they came back, or if it's somebody new, feel free to ask any questions. Thank you for being here. Hope this is kind of interesting and enlightening just for how the body does this stuff. I think it's really fascinating. It's cool to have this information, because for me, once I can wrap my head around like the basic 10,000 foot view of things and the basic tools that I can use to support it, it feels empowering, because then it's like, oh, I know how my body works, and I know a few simple, safe things that are really effective to support that. I already mentioned fiber. The last thing, not the last thing, two more things. One of the things that helps the liver to detox is if we increase bile production, right? Because that's where I was saying the toxins leave in the bile. So if we can increase the amount of bile production in the liver, and then also increase the amount of bile that is put out and leaves the gallbladder. So if we're pushing bile production along, we're pushing detoxification along, right? So what I'm going to mention are a couple of ways that I increase the bile production. But I want to stress again that the first thing that has to happen is regular bowel movements. You don't want to start supporting liver detox and pushing the liver to do its work more, pushing more bile to come out, etc., if you're not having regular bowel movements, because all you're doing then is you're pumping stuff out of the pool, but most of it's just coming back in, right? And so you've got this, it's called enterohepatic, which just means gut liver recirculation, enterohepatic recirculation. So you don't want to start squeezing this out if you're not getting as much as you can out that way. But you can increase bile production with largely herbs, is how I think of it. My favorite herb is dandelion root. It's just like pervasive. People call it a weed, and I'm like, this is amazing medicine. You can use different parts of the dandelion for different things. The leaf is actually a little bit more supportive to the kidneys because it's a bit of a diuretic and there's a lot of potassium in it. But I use the dandelion root as my number one liver pushing herb, because it's got these actions that are called cholagogue and choleretic. So a cholagogue herb makes the liver make more bile, and the choleretic makes it squeeze more bile out. So dandelion root is a great way to just sort of just nudge the liver along a little bit in how much toxins it's excreting. The easiest way to do herbal medicine consistently, I think, is a tincture, like a liquid extract. You can get alcohol extracts, and you can also get glycerin extracts. What about green tea? I'll come back to that. But yeah, with herbal medicine, so you can drink tea every day. Like dandelion root tea is great. It's just hard to be consistent with, usually with a tea like a root, because you have to simmer it and decoct it, and it's like realistically, logistically, to do that every day, most people aren't going to probably do that. So a liquid extract like a tincture is a great way. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I think I would say it Laufey or Laufey. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Asked what about green tea. The things I think of with green tea, I pretty much think of it as a nice strong antioxidant. So yeah, I would think of it being supportive to the liver from the antioxidant perspective. There might be some other things I don't know in regards to the liver, but yeah, I mean, green tea is awesome. There's a lot of research on green tea and being cancer protective, especially from populations like Asian populations that consistently drink it. It's been correlated to decreased cancer. So yeah, green tea, I got nothing bad to say about it. Interestingly though, green tea has some caffeine, but it also has L-theanine in it, which is really calming. It affects the calming part of the central nervous system. And so you kind of get this balanced effect, but it's funny, like I'm not very sensitive to caffeine. I can drink coffee all day long if I want to, and I'm just like, fine, I can go to bed at night. So I'm not very sensitive to caffeine, but I'm really sensitive to L-theanine. So if I drink green tea, if it's brewed lightly, I'm just like kind of calm. And but if it's very strong or I drink too much of it, I'll just like want to go to sleep because it's just puts me down that much, which I didn't realize was not normal for most people. Most people are like, what? I could drink green tea as a nice little like wake up in the afternoon. But side note. So that's mainly the stuff I want you to know on the liver. Just to bring it back. The main things that I do with people as basic liver detox support is usually I give people NAC. That's the main thing I'll use to support phase 2. So at the most basic, I'll say like, okay, use the N-acetylcysteine to support phase 2, and it does so many other amazing things in the body. Like NAC, it's like hard to argue that it wouldn't be good for almost anything because it increases glutathione, so it helps your body overall antioxidant wise. So I'll use that if I want to, and then I'll make sure bowel movements are good and make sure there's enough fiber. And if that stuff's already good, or once we get that going well, then I might use dandelion root to kind of push it along a little bit. And then make sure people are drinking enough water. Sometimes I'll have them mix like an electrolyte powder that has different B vitamins and things in it in water, because that's a way to help people drink more water. And those things are also supportive to that process, as well as to the kidneys if there's different electrolytes in it. I'm just looking at my notes here for kidney detox. I don't think that there's anything else I really want to say about that. There's kidney protective things, but the main things that damage kidneys that you want to address, if it's not addressed, is hypertension. High blood pressure is really damaging to the kidneys over time, will lead to chronic kidney disease, decreased GFR, which is just decreased flow rate through the kidneys because of the damage. So hypertension and diabetes, when there's hyperglycemia, all that sugar floating around is really damaging to the insides of the arteries, and the filtration system of the kidneys is a ton of little tiny vessels that does this amazing filtration system, and that gets damaged in diabetes. So those are really important things to address. And if you're keeping your kidneys healthy, I don't think, and drinking enough water, I don't think that there's like a lot else that needs to happen. But the biggest one that people just don't think about, and I don't know that I ever would have until I went through naturopathic med school, and this was one of the things that came up many times, is the skin and the fact that the skin and sweat is the skin's a huge organ, and that through sweating you can detox most chemicals, including heavy metals. So sweating on a regular basis is awesome, because now like magic trick, it's like the in and out, like I was saying, this is like the digestive tract, but now it's like, oh no, wait, guess what, you can also sweat. And it's like, if the liver's right here like doing all this work, it's kind of like you've just got this other little pipe over here, because now if you're sweating on a regular basis, which the easiest way to do it is through sauna, and I usually recommend people to do it as much as you can, really, as long as you're staying hydrated and replacing electrolytes, but 3 times a week as a actual like detox protocol, 3 times a week, and sweat for 20 minutes. It's a really good place to be. But now you're getting stuff out here. You just really opened up another outflow channel, and you just took all this burden off of your liver, because the liver's doing so much already. So sweating stuff out gives the liver the opportunity to do only what the liver can do. And in sweat, you'll lose, so you can get most heavy metals, including mercury, out. So it's one of the things when people test high for heavy metals, I will really encourage them to get on a sweating protocol. If you don't have sauna access, sometimes you can rent packages depending on your town and what there's available. People have saunas, they'll rent out time. But you can sweat in a bath. That's the alternative if you don't have a sauna, to take a hot bath. And you can sweat it out in the bath. But yeah, you can get heavy metals out, but you'll also lose metals like magnesium and I think zinc and like sodium and potassium and different electrolytes. So you'll lose, those are all metals, and you'll lose those things too in sweat. So you want to replenish fairly often. I usually use electrolyte powders because it's easy, but you can take multi-minerals and things like that. So you'll start to, just by way of getting things out in this way, you'll start to decrease this pool. But another way that you'll decrease the pool and increase the need for getting stuff out is if you're losing weight or if you're losing fat. Because remember I said towards the beginning that a lot of toxins are stored in the fat in the body. You're not going to be losing like fat from your brain, where things may be stored. That's just kind of like, if there's stuff there, like over time, if you're getting stuff out, the gradient should be such that things will start to leave eventually. But fat other places on our body, if we're losing fat, there's going to be a lot more stuff coming out, but also realizing that fat turns over. Adipose cells are, it's like considered its own organ basically, because fat cells make hormones. They're these own factors. They're not just like these. I think it's easy to view fat as just stuff that sits there, isn't doing much, and sometimes we don't like it. But it's actually this whole metabolic process, just like any other cell. And so there's a turnover. So it is important to replace with good clean fats. So most of us know that there's health benefits to omega-3s. So that's one good reason, especially if you're doing sweating, which will probably cause you to start burning some fat, or if you're doing any kind of certain diet regimen or anything to burn fat, you want to replace with good fats, because then that fat can go in and take the place. And so like omega-3s are anti-inflammatory and can go in and take the place of what was there before, because a lot of those fats, every single cell is surrounded by fat molecules, and that's in that cell membrane. That's where a lot of toxins can sit too. So those membranes get damaged from the toxins being there. So you want to come in and replace that with non-oxidized fats. So it's worth considering maybe supplementing with, sometimes I'll have people supplement with fish oil, or I'll just have them increase some fat in their diet, like olive oil, coconut oil, because that helps all of the cells to function better, to have healthy fats in the membrane that aren't damaged from toxins. So that's the main stuff I want you to know. This is, I think once you understand this, it's like, oh, that's not that complicated. And like most things in medicine, I find that like the basis of it is pretty simple. But this is one of those things that, even though it's simple, not everybody knows how it works, and most people aren't really doing things to optimize this stuff. And like I said at the beginning, it doesn't matter how long someone who comes to see me has been sick. I'm gonna make sure that this stuff is working well, because I know from the science and from my own experience that if I don't do anything else, and I make sure that their body's detoxing well, and we're decreasing what's coming in from the outside if there's a large burden, that they're going to start to feel better. Their energy is going to probably improve, and any symptoms that are directly related to the estrogen example is a really nice one. Like any symptoms that may be there because of, say, increased estrogen, those are going to really improve and they might completely go away. Sometimes it's issues with menopause and PMS. Um, a lot of times those will just be non-issues once you can get the liver processing estrogen well. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that you kind of feel like you have a grasp of this and some tools to implement. If you're into herbal medicine, there's tons of herbal options to support liver. It's really cool how many herbs there are that support liver function. So if you have an herb book, look into that. You can terms to look for would be like hepatoprotective, which is liver protective. The terms that I used for I'll write it down here, for supporting the bile production is, I may spell it wrong, they're kind of odd words, cholesterol, okay, it's not backwards, and choleretic, so that's increased bile and how much is pushed out. I think I forgot to mention beets. I wanted to mention beets to y'all as a liver supportive food that, from my understanding of it, that it thins the bile a little bit so that it's, so if you've ever heard of people having sludgy bile or like sometimes there's like sediment that can get in the gallbladder and stuff like that, like increasing beets big time is one of the things that I would recommend to like thin the bile and try to move that stuff out. So that's just like another food option that's really great and easy to access. What kind of sauna do you recommend? Old-fashioned or the red light sauna? Well, it depends. For sweating, it doesn't matter. If whatever it is, if it gets you sweating, then that's great. But for pain, I would recommend the infrared sauna because that's penetrating in a different way. So I would, so if it's to help with any kind of pain, I would say infrared. But for this, for detoxing, you just need to sweat. So any other questions? Thank you for spending part of your New Year's Eve day or evening with me. I really appreciate it. Nice to have you here and have some questions. I'll give just another minute in case there's any questions about anything at all, and then we'll go in this video. If you're watching this video at a later point, I'll come back and look at the comments. You're welcome to put comments or questions in there later and I will answer them. All right. Well, I'll hop off. Take care. I'll see you in 2021. All right.